Hi, everyone, and welcome to our April 3rd Fired Up program with AACG. I'm your host, Demetra Theophanis, and we have these programs every Friday on the first Friday of each month. They're always free and open to the public, so if you're not on our email list, please visit aacgglass.org, and you can get notifications every time we have one of these programs. Also, if you enjoy the program today and would like more expanded content, we do actually have Zooms exclusively for our members every Friday of the month, and those get uploaded to our private member video library on our website. So if you're interested in joining, again, please visit our website. We'll drop that in the chat as well, and you can read more about it and consider joining. All right, so I'm very, very excited about our program today. It's such a special program to really look at the culmination of a massive public art project from design to final installation. We have with us artist Morgan Madison. He is based in Seattle and uses a variety of materials and processes to create work that is informed by his love of drawing and inspired by place, the colors, textures, design, and landscape which help define the places we live. And joining him is John Rees. John is in Oregon. He is currently the studio and project manager for Bullseye Studio. Prior to Bullseye, he taught glass as a creative material at universities and nonprofits around the country. And his original background prior to glass was as an architectural designer, working on a variety of educational projects. And he will be talking with Morgan today to share the project that they worked on and all of the heart and soul that went into 2.5 years of this project creation. So Morgan and John, please take it away.
Thank you, Demetra, and thanks to all of you. Hope you're all doing well today. Thank you. Big thanks to the AACG team for all the promotion and for doing this, for bringing us together in this class community. It's awesome to have this opportunity to share this project with you guys. As Demetra alluded to, this was, it took about 2.5 years from start to finish. So it was really intense and meaningful project for me, and to get to share it with you all is just, it's awesome. I'm thrilled to be here and stoked to be here with John. Who was a big part of this project for me. Would you like to introduce yourself, John?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm John. I think Demetra did a great job introducing me, but I would like to say what a pleasure it was to work on this project with Morgan. It's one of the smoothest projects we've had here in the studio, and the entire thing was like I said, just a really great pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, let's jump into this. I have prepared, along with John, we collaborated on a PowerPoint here for you. And I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys all see that? Excellent. Yeah, so we're here today to talk about the journey that we went on to create this kiln form glass installation for the Seattle Tacoma International Airport. And I'll get into all those details here in a bit. We're going to walk through all of it. But I thought we might just start by going back to the beginning. Is this going to work here? Yes, we're using the mouse. I thought I would just give a little context for who I am and where I'm coming from and kind of what led me to this project that we're talking about here today. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, the middle of 3 brothers, the angelic middle child. Very early on, I found my niche in art. Among the hubbub of the household, the wrestling and the video games, I could find solace, escaping to my room to imitate the drawings in the comic books we collected. And fortunately, my interests in art were encouraged by my parents and siblings and teachers, and those encouragements eventually led me to Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, where my career in art began. I studied studio art. That was my with a focus in drawing. And one of the reasons I was drawn to Lewis and Clark is that they have a really well-established study abroad program. So I was fortunate to spend a good part of my junior year in Ecuador, where I was living with a host family and learning language and culture and getting to just see a part of the world I never imagined I'd get to visit. And that was really impactful on me. And that ended up being the focus of my senior thesis project, which was a series of oil bar portraits on textured paper of people that I got to know along the way. So I was working from photographs and really kind of trying to focus in on the details. The work is very different than the work that I do now, but I see a through line in the editing and the trying to focus in on the details that matter and sort of losing extraneous information. After college and when student loans finally came due, I decided I needed to get some kind of real job. And I was looking for anything I could find that was art related. And it turns out there was this company across the river called Bullseye Glass Company. I knew nothing about it, but the pay was pretty decent. I could ride my bike there. So I went in for an interview, and Debbie in HR took me around to the casting floor, which is what they were hiring for casters. And it was loud and hot and intense. And I thought, I'll take this job for a minute until I can find a little something a little more suitable. But as many of you can imagine, I was quickly bitten by the bug. I bet that's familiar to a lot of you. And I quickly became, really interested in this material and what the potential was for working with it. And so what I thought was going to be a quick stint turned into 7.5 years that I worked at Bullseye, and really, was able to cut my teeth, to start experimenting with the material and learning about it technically, but then also really trying to then apply, the voice I had been developing as an artist to this material. And I've been really fortunate. I mean, that journey continues to this day, right? I'm still learning new things about the material and how it can amplify my voice and to tell the stories that I'm interested in telling. I've been really fortunate to get to do some travel in pursuit of learning about this material, and that's been really impactful and really, brings me back home to where this project that we're going to talk about today, is happening. And so I got to spend some time at Northlands Creative in Leicester, Scotland, on a Richard Paris, Steve Klein residency. I met some of you folks there, which was a really excellent time. I spent a lot of time drawing and just, gathering information to work with later, making sketches, taking photographs, trying to sort of take stock of the environment around me, and then subsequently working with those materials, to develop works in glass that were, more well considered, glass and other materials. I was really fortunate to spend 6 months in New York City with a residency at the Museum of Arts and Design, which was really incredible, exploring glass alongside other materials and really just, exploring the city, responding to it, and, getting to experience it in a way that you can on just a week-long visit was really, excellent. I gathered years and years worth of materials to work with, still playing with them today. But again, the through line of sort of grabbing, elements from these different environments that resonate with me and then, revisiting them in different ways, exploring them through glass and other materials. Most recently, I was able to do a residency at S12 in Bergen, Norway, which was really cool, sister city of Seattle, and it really just a remarkable place. So again, just these experiences of pursuing glass around the world, really helping to sort of dial in for me the notion that place is really important in my work, right? It's sort of the focal point where I'm drawing a lot of my inspiration from. And so all those experiences, bring us back to right where I'm standing here today. In the early 2020s, the Port of Seattle, which runs the Seattle Tacoma International Airport, embarked on this really ambitious project to totally remake the North Main terminal there. So they're adding space and opening up space and really making it just a much more inviting experience for passengers and employees alike. And fortunately, alongside of that, construction project, some money was allocated for the public art program. And about 3 years ago or so, there's a request for qualifications that went out for about 5 different projects, permanent projects, there in the North Main Terminal. And so I submitted my qualifications for a couple of them. So my resume, letter of interest, images of my previous work. And then I waited and I waited and I waited a couple months. And then I got this incredible call out of the blue that the selection committee had chosen me for one of these projects, what they were calling the exterior glass project. And so essentially it was to encompass these 2 brand new sectors. So this space was not open to the public previously, but this was developed into Alaska Airlines bag drop and check-in. And so if you can imagine these really long stretches between these 3 sky bridges, that was sort of my purview. But what this project would look like was really, whoopsie, um, kind of up in the air. I had a lot of freedom, but with freedom, that can be challenging, right? How to narrow it down. But really quickly with conversations with the team at the Port of Seattle, and then also with Bullseye Studio, I started to home in on what could be accomplished right in this space. So you'll notice it's really long space, but actually when you're in it, it's quite constrained. And you can imagine like at peak travel time, this place is packed like wall to wall with people. And so very quickly it became apparent that this artwork needed to sort of be out of the way. And so the easiest way to do that was to install it on the right-hand side here within the existing curtain wall. And that actually served a few different purposes. One, we got to take advantage of the natural light, right? The illumination from outside could illuminate the work for all the passengers and folks inside. And then also it kind of safely gets it out of the way of all the operations happening in that space. And so through a process of on-site visits, meetings with folks, we kind of narrowed it down to what this project could look like. And that was really helpful, right? Starting to put some parameters in place. And so while I'm working alongside the team at SEA and Bullseye to sort out the technical details, I'm really working on, well, what's the concept behind this? And I kept going back to Gateway, right? SEA Gateway. It's the name of their the name of this program. It really speaks to the role of the airport in this, not just this city or in Puget Sound, but to the greater region. It's really a hub, a gateway for this whole sort of region known as Cascadia, which I think kind of has a romantic term. I just love it, as a boy from the suburbs of Denver, this notion of Cascadia, this great land on the sort of the wild Pacific Northwest coast and inland of that is just really, it speaks to me. And so I've spent, the last couple decades of my life up here in Oregon and Washington getting to explore it. And so right away, I'm like I was doing at my residencies, I'm drawing on my personal experiences of this place, all the places I've been where I have camped and stayed and traveled and hiked and taken photographs and made sketches. And so I've already got a lot of materials to work with. And alongside these materials that I've amassed personally in my experiences, I'm also doing research. I checked out a lot of library books, bought some different guides. I'm reading about the flora and fauna and geology of this place, trying to sort of make this large concept of Cascadia something more, more manageable, sort of turn it into sort of bite-sized pieces that I can work with. And I was lucky to find this cool book, the Cascadia Field Guide, which actually combines like poetry and artwork alongside like scientific facts and information. It's a really cool book. If you're at all interested, I recommend checking it out. But they had broke Cascadia down into 13 different bioregions. And that appealed to me for a number of reasons. 13 is my lucky number and birthday. But then in looking at this space that I had to work with at SEA, I realized that the number 13 broke down evenly. It would space out really evenly throughout that space, right? I knew I couldn't fill that entire length with kiln-formed glass. If only there was a budget for that. But if I broke it down and spread it out, it meant I could activate the entire space and in a meaningful way, with a reason. And so through those meetings and my research, all that, it really helped me home in on what this project was going to look like and why. And so I can let you read that for a second, have a sip of coffee here. But yeah, essentially I wanted these works to almost act like stained glass windows, right? I wanted them to be these bright pops of color that acted kind of, act kind of like oases within this bustling travel environment, right? I wanted them to flood the space with color and character. And to do that, I knew that I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Here's a little map just showing how that breaks down, how those 13 artworks spread throughout these two sectors. This is just kind of my little drawing. Measurements, I was out there at least 3 times taking measurements to make sure, measure 3 times, cut once being the idea, just to make sure everything as, was as I thought it was, comparing the architectural drawings that I was given to the real world conditions. There were some variations. So definitely being diligent paid off down the road. Yeah, so design process. I knew that I wanted to layer glass and I wanted it to be kiln formed. I did a lot of research after winning the project before jumping into this on, glass in the public art world. And I really wanted to introduce the language of kiln form glass into public art in this space because it's so distinct. I mean, it has just so much, I'm preaching to the choir here. It just has so much character, so much personality, so much potential. And so I really wanted to work with colored sheet glass and layering glass to create, rich color palettes and distinctive compositions. And so I started with my usual analog tools, colored pencils and paper, which are my first loves. They're kind of like my security blanket. But quickly I realized that they were not going to quite cut it in this case. And so I turned to the iPad. I needed to work faster and to be able to work in layers because that's literally what I was designing for. So with my sketches and all the research I'd done ahead of time, I jumped on the iPad and started designing, really kind of three-dimensionally, if you will, in a couple different layers. There are different ways to go about that I explored. Procreate is a really well-known and highly touted tool for drawing. I ended up working with Sketchbook a lot. I just found it to be a little, it has less options. And so it was a little less intimidating for me. But I found it to just work, really well for being able to get ideas down quickly. I have a little video to share here. There we go. Just a little time lapse of working with it, So what it allowed me to do is, work really quickly, um, make decisions, go back, be working on different design layers at the same time, working in different, it's such a smooth process. I can't imagine I had lived without it for so long in my life. Just what it allowed me to do in such quick order, it would have taken so much longer to try and do this in more traditional ways. But it was neat to be able to, yeah, work in different layers, try ideas out, scrap them easily, move on, move forward. And then one of the cool things is I was also able to import the Bullseye color conversion chart. And I'm literally working with a palette of colors that represent Bullseye sheet glass. And so I'm really kind of ahead of the game here, right? Where I'm working in layers with colors that actually represent Bullseye glass colors. And so this was a really fun process, and I think really effective for this project where I was able to design in two different layers, all kind of at once, and get to see it in real time and say toggle back and forth. Just gonna get to it in a second. I'll fast forward this now. So I'm able to keep track of all the different style codes. Those are numbers representing the Bullseye glass, sheet glass colors. That's a whole separate layer, so I can keep track of exactly which, colors I'm working with. And so then these are kind of the results. I've got these two different design layers representing, the artwork. And when they're overlaid, then it creates the composition that I'm going for, right? One thing to note is that the files that are created with this program are raster. And for the next steps of the process, having vector files is really important, and I'll let John kind of speak to their process of accomplishing that. In the future, what I would probably have done is taken these then into Adobe Illustrator and converted them into Illustrator files, which are vector-based. And so that was definitely a learning experience for me. And I've since gotten to do a project where I managed the workflow in just that way, where I drew in Sketchbook, brought it into Adobe Illustrator, converted it to vector, and then handed it to a fabricator to create a CNC carving for me. So kind of a technical detail that I'll let John get to because that's his strong suit. Alongside all the work I'm doing, on the laptop digitally, I'm also in my studio making color tests just to make sure these colors are doing the things that I expect them to, right? When you layer different colors, there could be some unexpected results. And so I'm making tests just confirming that what I'm seeing on my screen is, close to what we're really going to see. And it's not going to be accurate. In order to see the image on the left, I have to dim one of the layers to about 60% opacity So it changes it. These colors in the drawings are not going to be as intense as they are in the kiln form panels. I know that and I can keep track of that in my head, but actually seeing the tests alongside the drawings really kind of brings home like the differences in what I can expect and how much more dramatic and interesting these glass panels are going to be than these drawings, which I love them and they're soft and they're kind of gentle and they're very I'm very fond of them. But then you turn these into glass and now you've really got something. One of the last steps we took before jumping into fabrication was a Bullseye Studio took one section of one of my drawings and then fabricated a sample at full scale, using exactly the processes from start to finish that we would for the full size panels. And it was excellent. It gave us a lot of information. We actually learned a few things. If you notice in this particular sample here, we've got some halos, right? We've got some lighter spots where some of the seams are, and that was a product of the order that the certain layer was fired in. And so seeing this, we actually decided we made a second sample with the firing happening in kind of a different order, and it eliminated those, which was my preference. And so again, just doing due diligence all on the way, just trying to be extra careful, with every step to make sure, everybody's got a full understanding of what we're doing. We're all communicating. We all have expectations are set, it really just, I can't reiterate enough how much communication was critical to this whole project. And so anyway, here's a nice view of the edge of that panel. This has been laminated together, has this just really terrific kiln form surface. You got to see it in person to believe it, but it's really just, it's lustrous. It really draws you in. One of the really important things about this project was that it needs to work up close for people, right? People are literally standing right next to this. They could put their nose on it if they wanted to. But you can also see it from a great distance across from outside and from the parking structure. And so this work, I really wanted it to be, I wanted to reward viewers no matter where they were, be it far away or right up close where they could look and see all the details. And it just really hit all the marks. And so that kind of leads us to fabrication. I'm going to toss it over to John and he can share his screen and talk in some detail about that aspect of the process.
Thank you, Morgan. I just wanted to jump in before John gets started. We had a question from someone regarding, I think this was when you were talking about the different software programs you were using, and they said, did you set your layers at 33% for 3 layers, etc.? Can you clarify that at all?
Yeah, good question. Because I knew all along that these would only be 2 design layers, I never did any work where I actually had 3 layers, one on top of another. That does make a bit of sense that you would probably have to say set 2 of them to 33% and 1 to 100 if you were, say, working with 3 layers. But because 2 layers was always the goal here, I just would have one layer set at 100% and the other layer on top of it set at 60%. Good question.
Thank you. All right, John, thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, guys. Let's see. So just to start with, most people know Bullseye Glass is a company that developed the world's first line of tested compatible glasses for kiln forming. And we do that. We did do that. However, the studio area of Bullseye, what we do here is take the glass that is made just down the hallway in the factory and create large scale or complex projects on behalf of artists, architects, and designers. The page before this and this page, this page and the page after are some of the projects we've worked on recently with artists in addition to Morgan. The Wendy Red Star sculpture shown on the left now resides permanently at Tippett Rise in Montana. And the Spencer Finch piece is installed permanently at the Corning Museum of Glass. So anyone who's going to GAS this year, I would encourage you to get a picture in front of it. It's a really beautiful piece. At the studio, we're dedicated to providing a pathway for artists to work at this large and public scale. And, that's work that would be relatively challenging to achieve in a personal studio. I'll talk in a little bit about some of the sizes of the kilns that we have, but they're pretty big. Artists working with us also receive the benefit of working with people whose knowledge of this specific glass spans back half a century. We just had our 50-year anniversary recently. Here's some detail shots of the Spencer Finch work at Corning. And that work used a similar process to the one that I'm going to go into in the next several slides. In our process, we begin with the artist's rendering, in this case, Morgan's. And as he mentioned earlier, we use architectural CAD software to draw lines over the artwork. And these are vector-based lines as opposed to raster-based. I don't want to go too far into the differences between those, but in order for a process to work, the work really needs to be in vector-based lines. And that can be achieved as in CAD software that I've mentioned, but also in Adobe Illustrator for those who are more prone to Adobe products. Here's an image of what the file looks like once the artist drawing is hidden. And of course, as Morgan mentioned earlier, the numbers are Bullseye style codes that denote the sheet colors. It was really helpful that Morgan had such an in-depth knowledge of the product, and he was able to provide these to us right from the beginning, so we knew exactly what glass we'd be working with. Each of the individual panels in the artwork is comprised of two separate panels laminated together, as Morgan mentioned. And so this is the way that we were looking at the digital files and trying to figure out, okay, how do we align these in the proper way so that Morgan gets, the desired effects that he's looking for. And so after we've sort of run through all of this and figured this out, we begin taking each of those shapes and grouping them by the colors and placing them on little sketches of the physical sheets, the usable area of our sheets. And these are the files that we then take and send to our CNC scoring machine. We've also gone in here and added breakout lines. It's one thing to add the shape, but then you have to think about, okay, well, what's the best way to get this shape out of the sheet in one piece? Here's an image of our CNC glass scoring machine. And this machine was a real game changer for the studio. It adds a high degree of precision and efficiency to the work that we're doing here, especially on a project as large as Morgan's with so many pieces. We do, however, still make slight adjustments by hand to the work, and this helps ensure a tight fit. Here you can see some of the individual parts laid out on some full-size cartoons. And here our fabrication team is assessing the fit, making sure that we've got nice, clean mating from glass to glass and that there aren't any gaps. After the glass has all been cut, it's loaded into a kiln and fired to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit to fuse it together. Our largest kiln in the studio allows us to fuse pieces as large as 56 inches wide by 14 feet long. Or we can fire multiple panels at once, as we did with Morgan's project. On the left, you can see one such load just prior to firing. And on the right, you see a different set of panels just after firing, with our fabrication team standing around and discussing, how the firing went. Sketches like these play a critical role in communication between artists and fabricators, as Morgan mentioned. And here, the image on the right is showing the panels, how they'll be safety laminated together. You can also see in the image on the left, Morgan was talking a little bit about how to get crisp lines in the glass. And that is by laying up the individual components in what we would refer to as a design down layup, and then a sheet of clear glass is placed on top of it before it's melted together. And that just keeps all the lines together. It keeps them from spreading apart and having visual gaps in the colors. We often safety laminate our glass panels when required by code or if safety might be a concern. And the laminate material is a polyurethane resin. And as you'll see in this video, sometimes the glass is so strong that it doesn't break even when hit by a 100-pound bag of shot. Having said that, the glass is expected to break during this test, and when it does, the laminate material holds the shards together, ensuring the safety of those who might be around the glass if it were to break. This is also something that we do quite a bit of here at Bullseye. We spend a lot of time testing materials. According to the ASTM testing procedure dealing with safety lamination, if a 4-inch sphere is unable to pass through the broken glass, then the assembly passes the test and it's considered acceptable. And that's what you're seeing here is the assessment of the laminate. And here is an example of what the laminated panels looked like here at Bullseye Studio prior to being sent to Morgan for installation. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Morgan. But before I do, I wanted to mention that if you or someone you know has a project you'd like to achieve at a larger scale like this, or if you'd like to have Morgan do a large project for you, please reach out to me so that we can talk about it. We'd absolutely love to work with Morgan again. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Morgan.
There you are. I lost you for a sec. I was fast forwarding on my slideshow and then I couldn't find the Zoom. There's always got to be something technical, right? This is live after all. Thank you, John. That's excellent. Just a great behind the scenes look at the magic that happens at Bullseye Studio. I can't reiterate just how excellent their processes and the folks are there. The work that they do is just really, it's spectacular and so cool to see. For me, some of the highlights of this project were getting to go down at different points in the fabrication process and seeing the process in person and seeing the panels as they're coming out of the kilns. It was just really, really incredible. I mean, I got goosebumps the first time I went down and saw the first panel that was fired. I mean, from my little drawings on an iPad screen then to these giant, kiln formed beauties was just really, really something else. Okay, so let's get back to sharing my screen. And okay, I gotta go back. Can you see that slide that says installation? Excellent. Yes. So, John, how long were you guys working on this from start? I mean, what did you get? 6 months, something like that?
Yeah, I think we had initially expected the project to take around a year, but that was with other workload in the studio, and there were some things that finished up a little bit faster. So we were able to give Morgan our exclusive attention for about 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was excellent, and it was that gave me plenty of time to continue working on other things behind the scenes, engineering, making sure everything was in place for us to receive the artwork up here. And so gosh, I guess it was late November, a big truck pulled up to Bullseye and picked up their beautifully packed crates and loaded them up and then brought them here to Seattle to a company called Herzog Glass. These are professional glazers. They work with glass all day long, every day, in all different capacities. Typically, they're doing really large architectural projects. They're working out at Seattle Airport all the time. And so, again, like choosing Bullseye, a partner I knew I could trust, know what they're doing, have a ton of experience, and the right people working there. I knew that I could trust Herzog. They're out at the airport every single day. They know the procedures. They're professionals, and I could have tried to install this myself, but that would have been crazy. One of the big takeaways I have from this whole experience is hiring the right people to do the things that are maybe would be a reach for you, and that's been a little bit of a challenge for me. That was one of the challenges of this. Prior to this project, I have done probably, I don't know, 95% of my fabrication and installation all myself. And so to relinquish that control was a little bit difficult, but it really was critical to the success of this project. And so I was stoked to find Herzog, to work with them on the installation process. And it really, went quite seamlessly. I knock on wood. I guess I don't have to knock on wood. It's done now, but it was great to work with professionals all along the way here. This is just a little quick schematic of how the glass was installed. Essentially, what happened was the team from Herzog Glass installed anodized aluminum channel at both the top and bottom of each curtain wall opening. And that aluminum channel is sized such that the panels can actually be lifted up into the upper channel and then dropped down into the lower channel. And then those aluminum channels hold them in place. And then the ends and faces are finished to receive the glass permanently. So here's just a look at that aluminum channel. And here's a little video of them doing that procedure where they lift and essentially drop the glass into place. So right now, they're just setting it on the curtain wall. That's Nick on the left and Louis on the right. It's great working with these guys for a week. So they're lifting the glass into that upper channel, swinging it in, and then dropping it down to the lower. It's really slick. And it really just blends into with the curtain wall. I mean, what you see is the art glass, right? You're not seeing the installation at all. Here's a little time lapse of doing a set of 3 panels. This probably took an hour or something like that here, maybe. And then once the glass panels are in place, they are actually caulking each end with the silicone caulk, and then they use different foam tapes along the faces, just to ensure that the glass is securely in place and all buttoned up and looks really nice. So this is the first set of panels that they installed. This is Tidewater Glacier. The first panel you'd come to if you entered the promenade level from Skybridge 6. So now I'll just go through a few of these finished works. I don't have photos of all of them. We're still working on getting Bullseye's in-house photographer, up here to get professional shots of all of them. And we're kind of waiting for things to get a little sunnier here. It's a little sunnier here in Seattle to get good pics. So I've got some that I took, but once we get some professional ones, I'll be sharing those all over the place. You won't be able to escape your social media without seeing them. And then some of the up close details. Again, that texture, you gotta see it. It's really lovely. And what's cool about it is it's really resilient, right? One of the important things for me was that this not be a burden to the art team at Port of Seattle, right? I wanted this artwork to go in and be really low maintenance, really durable, and stand the test of time. I'm hoping to create a durable cultural asset for their collection that's, of long-lasting relevance. And so I think through the materials and processes that we chose for this, I think we've achieved that. Mount St. Helens, another detail. I can't speak enough about just the level of craftsmanship to have all of these really intricate lines, these gentle curves, these geometric shapes, all of these things just fit together so nicely that there aren't bubbles trapped in there, that they just fit together so cleanly. It's a testament to the level of execution and craftsmanship that they have there at Bullseye Studio. Just a dream to work with them. And, I've done work like this on a smaller scale by myself for years. So getting to see it scaled up like this through the process of working with others was just really, really impactful on me. Here's a view of 3 of them as they're installed. So you can see there's a artwork, and then we have 3 empty bays and an artwork. And so that allows, me to impact the entire space, right? Activate this entire long space with artwork, but then each one of them gets to breathe a little bit, right? They're not right on top of each other. So it actually really, I think, contributes to the flow of the space, the function of it. It just really, it's neat to see something you've dreamed about for 2.5 years finally coming together, and maybe even better than you could have imagined. Here is a little map that I made to help folks find it. If you're interested, take a screenshot, or it'll be available. I know they always post these videos on the AACG YouTube page. You can check it there or reach out to me if you're interested. But the artwork is located on the promenade level. It's the same level as the sky bridges, and it's spread between the first 3 sky bridges that you'll come to, between sky bridges 6 and 4, all through that space. So if you're ever traveling through SEA, go give it a look. As I mentioned before, none of this would have happened without the partners that I was able to work with through this process. All the awesome folks at Port of Seattle that helped, wrangle everybody into, believing in this vision and getting on board with it and making it happen. Of course, the good folks at Bullseye Studio that really made this happen, did the hard work of cutting and fitting and fusing and cleaning and laminating and all that stuff while I was, on vacation. I'm kidding. Good folks at Herzog Glass that helped me get through all the engineering issues, and then the installation itself. And then, of course, the folks here at home that supported me quietly behind the scenes all along the way, my wife, Rachel, and my dog, Sally, who, insists I take her on a couple walks every day. And that time just in the fresh air, thinking, reflecting, is probably some of the most valuable time. Preparing for this presentation, what did I do this morning? Took the dog for a walk and talked myself through it. And then here we have contact information for Bullseye, for John at Bullseye Studio, and then myself. If any of you are interested in learning more about this project, have any questions that you forget to ask today, don't hesitate to reach out. We are available if you want to talk about this project or a future project. John, please, anything?
I'm seeing a bunch of technical questions actually in the chat that I'd love to jump in and talk about once we wrap up.
Okay, I'm going to stop my share here and just say a quick thank you to everybody. Thanks for your attention. Let's get to those questions without further ado.
Thank you, Morgan and John. Really such a tremendous project and presentation, and really appreciate you sharing that with us. And I also really want to encourage everyone that is an artist that is on with us and interested in this. I know that these projects can seem a little bit daunting, but reach out to Bullseye directly, and any questions, big or small, I know that they can at least start to familiarize you with the process, even if you're not ready to actually apply, so you know kind of how to guide that and shoot for it in the future. So, all right, let's get to the questions. We did have someone ask about the lamination. They were surprised that it was on the inside of the panels, and if you could speak a little bit about that. Also, kind of touching along with that, if you could also talk about outdoor installations with regard to temperature change. I think both of those things would be helpful.
Great. Yeah, sure. So the lamination process, it's a polyurethane resin or urethane resin, and it's different than some of the other laminate processes. It does not use heat, which is really important. So we're very careful with what we're using with the glass so we don't thermal shock it. And the way the process works is the 2 panels are set up with spacers in between them. And then the edges are sealed, and then the laminate is poured in. And the laminate cures in about 24 hours. It's solid. However, it's still pretty sticky, even after 24 hours. It'll take a week or 2 before it's cured to the point where it's not going to be sticky. And so, to the question about why is it in between the 2 panes of glass, that's part of the answer to that question. Is it's not going to pick up dust or dog hair or things from your sweater. let's see, what else? We actually used a local laminator here in Portland, Oregon. Their name is Glass Strategies. They're really fantastic. Um, we use them exclusively with all of our projects, and they're great with working with us with even sort of really experimental things that we're trying here in the studio.
Okay. And can you also talk about outdoor projects and the thermal sensitivity of the glass?
Yes, thank you. Um, so one of the ways, so glass is, of course, sensitive to thermal changes, and that's something that we talk to our clients about quite a bit. And it's project dependent. You know, Morgan's project was installed on the inside of the curtain wall system, so it's unlikely that there's going to be extreme temperature changes. It's in a controlled space. It's also got a very sort of deep overhang protecting it from direct sunlight. Now, when we are working on a project that is installed outside, you know, there's a few questions that we ask, and that's, you know, what is the site orientation? Is the sun going to be hitting it? Is it in a place like Hawaii where the temperatures are relatively stable, or is it in the desert somewhere where, you know, it can be 30 degrees at night and then 100 degrees the next day? These are all things that we think about. And I would say our primary strategy to deal with some of these thermal changes is what we call symmetrical construction. And you can think of that as almost encasing the colored glass or differently colored glass with a homogeneous layer of usually clear glass or crystal clear glass. Um, and I'm not going to go too deep into the science of it or anything, but you can think of that as kind of holding everything together in a stable way.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
We also had a question on the CNC glass scorer, and how is that different from water jet, and why would you choose one over the other?
That's a great question. So with the CNC scoring machine, you can't take something out of the middle of a sheet. You know, you always have to have your breakout lines, and that works for certain projects. The reason I would use a water jet machine would be that if I need to take things out of the middle of shapes, or cut very specific shapes out of a sheet, especially if it's going to fit into a void of the same shape in something else. The other reason to use a water jet would be the thickness limitations of the CNC scoring machine. So we can comfortably score up to about a quarter of an inch, and we've scored things up to three three eighths of an inch. Yeah. But once you get more than that, you're likely to have your runs when you're running the glass after it's been scored, sort of go haywire. You know, once you get into that thicker glass, it's much more difficult. So that would be another situation that I would use the water jet for. And we're very fortunate. Portland Water Jet is right down the street from us. They moved to the neighborhood after we started using them so much for our water jet cutting needs. So we literally just, you know, take the glass right down the street to them.
That's great. We also
And
had a question. Oh,
one thing
sorry.
about the difference between the water jet and the CNC, the scoring machine, is the edge, the finish, right? Because with
Oh,
the water jet, you end up with the rough edge that's going to show if you fuse it just as it is. Whereas the scoring machine, you know, it leaves edges just like if you were to score and run the glass itself. So it doesn't have that potential for a haze or you know, a shading where pieces meet, where you see the edge.
that's a great point, Morgan. Thank you.
Yeah. There was also a question regarding the firing schedule, and if it's too complicated, we can wait till I stop the recording and go into that. But they were just curious about how you prevent the panels from warping.
Sure, I can talk about that. Morgan's project was somewhat challenging because of all the different colors of glass that were in one layup. And when you have all of those different colors together, there can be a tendency for things to move differently based on the chemistry of the individual layers. There's a couple things that helped with that. One is, this clear cap sheet that we were putting over it. But we often also use a strategy for really large panels like this, where we bring the kiln's temperature down to right around the annealing temperature, pause there, let the temperature in the kiln equalize, we'll bring it back up. And if there is any warpage, and it's right around 1100 degrees, we'll go to, I'd have to look at the schedule for the specific number. But what happens is if the glass has sort of cupped, it'll relax, and then we come back down from there even slower. And we refer to that in-house as a bounce. So if you're looking at a firing graph, you're coming up, you're hitting your process temp, you're cooling down to the anneal, and then you're sort of bouncing back up and then coming back down even slower.
Oh, great. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Judy Cushman. And I think this might be for John, can you talk about the learning process each time you have a major project? What are particularly difficult to execute projects that Bullseye does? Is it a unique capability?
Yeah, that's a lot. I would say almost every project we do is unique, sometimes drastically so. So there's a huge learning curve. We do a lot of testing. We've also got a lot of cumulative knowledge in the company. So everything from, our chemists who are devising the chemistry for the glass and the colors, to our hot end production team, which is actually making the glass. Everybody has knowledge that sort of feeds into what we're doing in the studio. And another unique sort of capability of the studio is we have the ability to request sort of non-standard things from the factory. So that is relatively unique to us to be able to go down the hallway and say, hey, we've got this really cool project. We'd really like to have something like this and use it in this way. Can you do it? And our hot end team is just very accommodating there. Then we also have, people like Dan who started this whole thing, and his knowledge of engineering is just out of this world. He's such a huge asset to projects. And then the last thing I think I might say is we, in addition to all the testing that we do, we take copious documentation. So at each stage of the process, we're having photographs of what the glass looks like. We have notes on, what the firing schedule was, how it was cold worked, where the materials came from. And all of that sort of adds together to provide us with a lot of confidence that we can make just about anything that anybody has the money to pay us to make.
Great.
I don't know if that answered the question,
yes,
but
yes.
Take notes for sure. That's huge.
A question for Morgan. In your budget, did you allow for a contingency? And if so, what percentage was that? And did you need to utilize it?
Yes, I definitely had contingency built in. I can't remember the exact percent off the top of my head. I think it was maybe around 7%, something like that. And luckily, it didn't come into play with the project, but I'm going to be able to use that now to get some of the professional photography done and do some other promotions around it and things like that. So definitely always building contingency. Absolutely. I know that a lot of places say, or I've seen in a lot of places 15%, depending on the size of the budget and particular project parameters, that might be too much. And in this case, it seemed like it was, but yeah, definitely had a contingency.
Great. And I'm wondering too if you can do anything to sort of demystify the application process for our artists online. I think one challenge that I hear come up a lot is that public art projects tend to look for artists with experience, and yet if you don't have that first project, how do you get that experience? So,
Yeah.
being that this was your first big one, maybe you can lend some light on that.
Yeah, that is the conundrum. You have to have one to get one, which doesn't make sense. Yeah, it really is challenging. And I think maybe part of the reason why I was a little late to coming to this realm, just thinking, well, I'd see, the calls for different projects online and be like, well, there's no way. Like, why would I bother? But luckily, there's an awareness of that problem out there, and there are different agencies that are actively working to sort of change that dynamic and open the door for more participation in public art. And so, for instance, here in Seattle, I was really lucky to be invited to take part in this program called Public Art Boot Camp, and it was put on by the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, and it was a year-long program or cohort program where basically I think 12 of us artists without really any public art experience worked with project managers from the Office of Arts and Culture. And there were seminars and site visits and discussions with artists that were with experience, and then it culminated in creating a temporary site-specific sculpture. And so that really with a decent budget too. And so that was really impactful to be able to add that to my resume. I know that at least at the Port of Seattle, that is not a deal breaker, not having a ton of public art experience. Tommy Gregory, the head of the program there, is really adamant about opening up opportunities for artists of all different styles, and areas of interest and focus. And so that's really cool. Keep an eye out for that. Oftentimes, the RFQs will be very specific about whether or not like you need experience, and they'll spell it out. If you don't have a project of 500,000 under your belt, don't bother. And so maybe you don't. But then some other projects, they'll say, public art experience not necessary or open to artists with limited experience. So keep an eye out for those details. And then I would also say consider partnering, if you don't have the experience alone, but maybe if you get somebody else on your team. Often I've yet to see one where you couldn't apply as a team to a public art project. And so, for example, for a couple large public art projects that have come onto the radar, since this SEA project of mine has been in the works, I've actually teamed with Bullseye for the application. So we've submitted together, and that way the jury, the selection committee can see my artwork, see my vision, and then see the teammates I've got to work with and their capacity to manage projects like that. So I would say just carefully monitor the projects you're looking at and consider teaming if that would be beneficial.
Great.
And we often do that with artists that we work with. Morgan's not the only one that we've sort of partnered with for that. With the studio having been around as long as it has, and the large number of public projects that we've done, we'll work with artists to lend that experience to them for their application. And of course, in return, they hire us to fabricate the work. So,
All right, great. Well, we do have more questions, but I think what I'd like to do is just stop the recording so that people can then unmute themselves and talk to you directly. I want to thank you both for being here. Such a tremendous project and really stunning. I hope people are able to get up to the airport to see it. I know that airport has actually a tremendous collection of other art in there as well, so it's worth going just to look at all the art in the airport collection. Thank you both. Thank you, Bullseye, John Rees, and Morgan Madison. Such a pleasure to have you.
thank you for
Thank
having
you all
us.
so much. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and just really thrilled to get to share this. And I hope it's inspiring and encouraging to all of you. That's the hope of doing this, is to inspire and encourage. And the sun came out. I'm literally being blinded, so I'm gonna roll down this way a little bit. Luckily, my setup is on a rolling rig. There we go. I can see again.
All right, thank you.